Colin stood in the driveway of his suburban California home, the same one he had shared with his wife, Lauren, for the past 25 years. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the lawn, and the smell of freshly cut grass lingered in the air. This was a day he had been planning meticulously for months, a day that would change everything. Colin was a meticulous man, a trait that had served him well in his career as a senior manager in a tech company. Now, at 45, he had opted for early retirement, carefully investing his stock options to secure a substantial retirement fund. His focus on technology investments had paid off, and his financial security was solid. Today, however, wasn't just about financial freedom. It was about liberation from a life that had become a facade. Colin had discovered Lauren's infidelity several months ago, a revelation that had shattered his world. Lauren, the woman he had loved and trusted, had been cheating on him with her boss, Eric. The discovery had been accidental. Colin had come across some emails on Lauren's computer that were unmistakably intimate. Shock had turned to anger, and anger to resolve. Colin had hired a private investigator to gather concrete evidence. The investigator had delivered more than Colin had expected: photographs, videos, and detailed reports of Lauren's affair with Eric. There were even recordings from their recent business trip to Vancouver, showing them together in compromising situations. The evidence was irrefutable, and Colin knew he had to act. He packed his bags with everything he needed for what he told Lauren was a business trip. He informed her that he'd park his company car at the airport, though in reality, it was still at the office. Colin's plan was to leave for good, but not before orchestrating a grand reveal that would expose Lauren's deceit. The night before, he had made sure to pack up his personal belongings and downsize his possessions, leaving only a few essentials. He had rented a U-Haul truck, leased through his family trust under his Uncle John's name, loaded with everything he was taking. Uncle John, a trusted family member, had arranged it all, ensuring there were no direct links back to Colin. Colin's 3 daughters, Jessica, the eldest at 23, and the 22-year-old twins, Emily and Sarah, were all in on the plan. They believed they were preparing for a surprise birthday party for their mother, blissfully unaware of the true nature of the event. The house was buzzing with activity as they decorated the backyard, setting up tables and chairs for over 50 guests, including family members, friends, and even some of Lauren's colleagues. Colin walked into the house, the cool air conditioning providing a stark contrast to the warmth outside. He found Lauren in the kitchen, busily preparing snacks for the party. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that once made his heart skip a beat, but now only reminded him of her betrayal. "Hey, honey, everything's almost ready," Lauren said cheerfully. Colin forced a smile. "Great, I'll just finish packing up for my trip," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. He went upstairs to their bedroom, where his suitcase lay open on the bed. Colin took a moment to look around the room, memories of their life together flooding his mind. The framed photographs on the dresser, the painting they had bought on their honeymoon, and the quilt Lauren's mother had made for them, all relics of a past that now felt like a lie. He finished packing and zipped up the suitcase. Taking a deep breath, he headed back downstairs. The house was beginning to fill with the aroma of cooking food, and he could hear the excited chatter of his daughters and the occasional burst of laughter. It was supposed to be a happy day, but Colin knew the storm that was about to hit. Jessica walked into the hallway, her face lighting up when she saw her father. "Dad, can you help me with the decorations in the backyard? We need to hang the banner." "Sure, sweetheart," Colin replied, following her outside. The backyard was a picturesque scene of suburban bliss. The lawn was neatly mowed, and the patio was decorated with streamers and balloons. A large banner reading "Happy Birthday, Mom" hung across the fence. Tables were set up with colorful tablecloths, and a buffet table was being arranged with an assortment of dishes. Colin helped Jessica secure the banner, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. He had prepared a video message for Lauren to be played at the height of the party. It started innocuously enough with birthday wishes and a recap of the past year, but it would soon take a darker turn. He had included clips from the surveillance footage, revealing Lauren's infidelity in explicit detail. As the guests began to arrive, Colin made sure everything was in place. He greeted family members and friends, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. The air was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses as people mingled and caught up. Lauren was the center of attention, her radiant smile masking the storm that was about to break. At 8 p.m., just as the sun was setting, Colin gathered everyone on the patio for a special announcement. The guests quieted down, their attention focused on him. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Lauren's birthday," Colin began, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "I have a special message for her that I'd like to share with all of you." He nodded to Jessica, who turned on the large patio TV. The screen flickered to life, showing Colin's recorded message. Lauren's smile faltered as she watched, confusion giving way to horror as the video progressed. "Happy birthday, Lauren," Colin's recorded voice said. "I want to take a moment to reflect on the past year and all the wonderful memories we've shared. But there's something I need to address, something that has changed everything." The video cut to the surveillance footage, showing Lauren and Eric in various intimate moments. Gasps and murmurs filled the patio as the guests watched in stunned silence. Lauren's face went pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. Colin continued to speak over the footage, detailing the extent of Lauren's betrayal and the evidence he had gathered. The video ended with a simple message. "Lauren, I can no longer be a part of this lie. This is goodbye." The silence that followed was deafening. Lauren's friends and family stared at her in shock, while her colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. Colin stood calmly, his expression resolute. Lauren finally found her voice, though it was shaky and filled with desperation. "Colin, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," Colin interrupted, his voice cold. "You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Jessica, Emily, and Sarah looked at their mother, tears streaming down their faces. They had been blindsided by the revelation. Their world turned upside down in an instant. The guests began to murmur, and a few quietly left, unable to bear the uncomfortable scene. Lauren's boss, Eric, who had been trying to blend into the background, was now the target of angry glares. His wife, Karen, stood up, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Lauren, Eric," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You've both destroyed our families. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." With that, she stormed out, leaving Eric to face the fallout. Lauren turned to Colin, tears streaming down her face. "Colin, please, let's talk about this. We can work it out." Colin shook his head. "No, Lauren. It's over. I'm leaving and I'm never coming back." With that, he turned and walked away, the weight of his decision lifting slightly with each step. He knew there would be difficult days ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope and freedom. As Colin walked away from the backyard, he could still hear the murmur of shocked voices behind him. He felt a pang of guilt for his daughters, who had been caught in the crossfire of their parents' battle. But he knew that the truth had to come out, no matter how painful it was. He got into his car, the same one he had driven for years, and started the engine. The house that had been his home for so long now felt like a prison he was finally escaping from. He drove through the familiar streets of the neighborhood, each turn bringing him closer to freedom. His first stop was the office where his company car was parked. Colin had arranged for a friend to pick it up later. He transferred his bags from his personal car to the company car, ensuring that nothing was left behind. He took a final look around, the memories of his career flashing before his eyes. It was a bittersweet moment, but one that marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Next, Colin headed to the airport. He had booked a one-way ticket to his hometown, a small place in South Dakota where he had grown up. It was a place that represented simplicity and peace, a stark contrast to the chaos his life had become. He looked forward to the drive east, with the rebirth of spring transforming the countryside into a landscape of renewal and hope. As he checked in for his flight, Colin felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sadness for what he was leaving behind, but also a sense of excitement for what lay ahead. He was ready to start over, to build a new life away from the lies and betrayal. After a smooth flight, Colin arrived at the regional airport in South Dakota. He picked up his rental car and began the drive to his family farm, the place he had inherited from his parents. It was a long drive, but one that gave him time to reflect on everything that had happened. The rolling hills and vast fields of his hometown felt like a balm to his wounded soul. When he arrived at the farm, he was greeted by his Uncle John, who had been taking care of the place in his absence. The old farmhouse looked as welcoming as ever, a beacon of stability in an uncertain world. "Welcome home, Colin," Uncle John said, embracing him warmly. "It's good to see you." "It's good to be back," Colin replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I've missed this place." They spent the evening catching up, Uncle John filling him in on all the local news. Colin felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. This was where he was meant to be. Over the next few days, Colin settled into his new life. He unpacked his belongings, set up his new bank accounts, and started working on the farm. The physical labor was therapeutic, a welcome change from the stress of his former career. He found solace in the simple routines, the quiet moments of reflection as he worked the land. One evening, as Colin was fixing a broken fence, he received a call from Karen, his divorce lawyer. They had grown close over the past few months, their shared experiences forging a bond that went beyond the professional. "Hi, Karen," Colin said, answering the call. "How are things?" "Busy," Karen replied with a sigh. "But I have some good news. The papers have been filed and we should have a court date soon." "That's great," Colin said, feeling a sense of relief. "Thank you for everything you've done." "It's my job," Karen said with a chuckle. "But I have to say, this case has been a bit more personal for me. I'm glad to see you moving on." "Thanks, Karen," Colin said. "I'm trying. It's not easy, but being here helps." "I'm sure it does," Karen said. "Listen, I wanted to let you know that I'm planning to visit South Dakota soon. I need a break from all this madness. Would you be up for a visit?" Colin smiled. "I'd like that. It would be good to see you in person." "Great," Karen said. "I'll let you know when I have the details. Take care, Colin." "You too, Karen," Colin said, ending the call. As he put his phone away, Colin felt a flicker of hope. There was a possibility of something new, something real. It was a small step, but one that filled him with a cautious optimism. The next morning, Colin was up early, sipping coffee on the porch as the sun rose over the fields. The tranquility of the moment was a stark contrast to the turmoil of his past life. He was beginning to feel at peace, the wounds of betrayal slowly healing. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up the driveway. He looked up to see Jessica, Emily, and Sarah getting out of the car. Their faces were etched with a mix of emotions, confusion, hurt, and a glimmer of hope. "Dad," Jessica said, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" "Of course," Colin replied, his heart aching for his daughters. They sat on the porch, the morning sun casting a warm glow over them. Colin listened as his daughters poured out their hearts, sharing their feelings of betrayal and confusion. He held them close, offering words of comfort and reassurance. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," Colin said, his voice filled with regret. "But you needed to know the truth." "We understand," Emily said, wiping away her tears. "It's just so hard to process." "It is," Colin agreed. "But we'll get through this together. We're family, and nothing can change that." As they talked, the bond between father and daughters grew stronger. They shared their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. It was a healing moment, a step towards rebuilding their shattered lives. By the time the sun was high in the sky, they had made plans to visit more often, to stay connected despite the physical distance. Colin felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to be there for his daughters in a way he hadn't been able to before. Later that day, as Colin worked in the barn, he reflected on the events of the past few weeks. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it was slowly being replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. He had a new life to build, and he was ready for the challenge. That evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, Colin felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He was finally free from the lies and deceit, free to live a life that was true to himself. And for the first time in a long while, he felt truly happy. Colin had always prided himself on being a thorough and meticulous man, and it was these very traits that had led him to uncover the truth about Lauren. The days following the discovery of her infidelity had been a whirlwind of emotions, but amid the storm, Colin had found clarity. He knew he couldn't confront Lauren directly. She was too adept at deflecting blame and twisting the narrative. Instead, he needed undeniable proof, evidence that would leave no room for denial or manipulation. It all started a few months ago. Colin had returned home early from a business trip, expecting to surprise Lauren. Instead, he had been the one caught off guard. The house was empty, and there was an eerie silence that felt out of place. He shrugged it off initially, assuming Lauren was out with friends or running errands. But as he settled into his home office, he noticed her laptop was left on, something she rarely did. Curiosity got the better of him, and he glanced at the screen. An email notification caught his eye, an email from Eric, her boss. The subject line was innocuous enough, but something about it felt off. Colin clicked on it, and what he found made his blood run cold. The email was intimate, filled with endearments and references to a recent trip they had taken together. It was clear that their relationship was far more than professional. Colin felt a surge of nausea as he scrolled through the email. His mind raced, trying to process the betrayal. This couldn't be real. Lauren wouldn't do this to him, to their family. But as he read more, the truth became undeniable. Eric's words were explicit, detailing their time together in a way that left no room for doubt. He closed the laptop and sat back in his chair, his mind spinning. He needed proof, something more concrete than emails. And so he hired a private investigator, a decision that would change everything. The investigator, a man named Ray, was discreet and efficient. Within a few weeks, he had gathered a wealth of evidence, photographs, videos, and detailed reports of Lauren's affair. The most damning piece of evidence came from a recent business trip Lauren and Eric had taken to Vancouver. Ray had managed to obtain footage of the two of them together, footage that was both explicit and irrefutable. Colin watched the videos alone in his office, each frame confirming the betrayal that had shattered his world. But Colin wasn't one to act impulsively. He knew he needed a plan, something that would ensure Lauren couldn't wriggle out of the consequences of her actions. He decided to bide his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came with Lauren's upcoming birthday. Colin spent weeks meticulously planning the party, coordinating with his daughters to ensure everything was perfect. They had no idea of the storm that was brewing, believing they were helping to celebrate their mother's special day. Colin felt a pang of guilt for involving them, but he knew they needed to see the truth as well. He had the perfect cover, his early retirement. He used it as an excuse to downsize his possessions and quietly prepare for his departure. Lauren was too caught up in her affair to notice the changes, too confident in her ability to keep her secrets hidden. Colin let her believe she was still in control, all the while setting the stage for her downfall. On the day of the party, Colin was a bundle of nerves. He went through the motions, greeting guests and making small talk, but his mind was focused on the reveal. As the sun set and the party reached its peak, he knew it was time. The video he had prepared was queued up and ready to play. He called everyone's attention and began his speech, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. This was it. This was the moment everything would change. As the video played, the reaction was immediate and intense. Gasps and murmurs filled the air, and Lauren's face went from confusion to horror in an instant. Colin watched her closely, noting every flicker of emotion. She was caught, and there was no way out. The relief he felt was immense, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. There would be fallout, and he needed to be prepared. The days following the party were a blur. Colin left California, heading back to his hometown in South Dakota. He felt a mix of relief and sadness as he drove away, the familiar landscape of his past offering a sense of solace. The farm was just as he remembered it, a place of peace and simplicity. He settled into a routine, finding comfort in the physical labor and the quiet moments of reflection. One evening, as he was repairing a fence, Colin's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Ray, the investigator. Colin wiped his hands on his jeans and answered the call. "Hey, Ray," Colin said. "What's up?" "Just wanted to check in," Ray replied. "How are things on your end?" "Better," Colin said, looking out at the fields. "Being here helps." "Good to hear," Ray said. "Listen, I've got some additional information for you. It seems Eric is in deeper trouble than we thought. He's been using company funds to finance his trips with Lauren. His wife is filing for divorce and suing him for embezzlement." Colin felt a surge of satisfaction. "Serves him right. Thanks for the update, Ray." "No problem," Ray said. "If you need anything else, just let me know." "I will," Colin said. "Take care." As he ended the call, Colin couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was coming out. He returned to his work with renewed energy, his mind clearer than it had been in months. That night, as he sat on the porch, Colin reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It had been painful and challenging, but it had also been necessary. He was building a new life, one that was honest and true, and for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future. The following days brought a sense of routine and purpose that Colin hadn't felt in years. The farm required constant attention, and he welcomed the hard work. It kept his mind occupied and his body tired, which helped to stave off the emotional turmoil that still lingered beneath the surface. Each day was a step toward healing, and each night brought a bit more peace. One morning, as Colin was working in the barn, his phone rang again. This time it was his oldest daughter, Jessica. He hesitated before answering, knowing the conversation was likely to be difficult. He took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Hey, Jess," he said, trying to sound upbeat. "Hi, Dad," Jessica replied, her voice shaky. "We need to talk. Can we come over?" Colin's heart sank. He had been expecting this. "Of course. When?" "We're on our way," she said. "We'll be there in about an hour." "I'll be here," Colin said, ending the call. He spent the next hour tidying up the house and making coffee. He needed to be prepared for whatever his daughters had to say. When he heard the sound of a car pulling up the driveway, he went outside to greet them. Jessica, Emily, and Sarah got out of the car, their faces a mix of emotions. "Come on in," Colin said, forcing a smile. They followed him inside and sat around the kitchen table. Colin poured them each a cup of coffee and sat down, bracing himself for the conversation. "We've been talking," Jessica began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We need to understand why you did what you did." Colin nodded. "I understand. It's complicated, but you deserve to know the truth." He took a deep breath and began to explain everything. How he discovered Lauren's affair, the evidence he gathered, and why he chose to reveal it the way he did. He spoke slowly and clearly, making sure they understood every detail. Jessica, Emily, and Sarah listened in silence, their expressions shifting from shock to understanding to sadness. When Colin finished, there was a long pause as they processed everything he had said. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this alone," Emily said, tears in her eyes. "We had no idea." "I didn't want to hurt you," Colin replied, his voice breaking. "But you needed to know the truth." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "We're a family, Dad. We'll get through this together." Colin felt a surge of emotion as he squeezed her hand. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." They spent the rest of the day talking, sharing their feelings and trying to make sense of the situation. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also healing. They were beginning to understand each other in a way they hadn't before. That evening, after his daughters had left, Colin received another call from Karen. She had booked her trip and would be arriving in South Dakota the following week. Colin felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Karen had been a rock for him during the divorce, but their relationship was still new and uncertain. The week passed quickly, filled with preparations for Karen's visit and the usual farm work. When the day finally arrived, Colin found himself pacing the floor, unable to sit still. He drove to the airport early, arriving just as Karen's flight was landing. He stood by the arrival's gate, scanning the crowd for her familiar face. When he saw her, his heart skipped a beat. She looked just as beautiful as he remembered, her brunette hair styled to perfection and her smile lighting up the room. She spotted him and waved, her eyes shining with excitement. "Colin!" she called out, rushing toward him. "Karen!" he replied, opening his arms to embrace her. "It's so good to see you!" They hugged tightly, the months of separation melting away. Colin felt a sense of relief wash over him. This was real. This was the beginning of something new. They drove back to the farm, chatting about everything and nothing, just enjoying each other's company. When they arrived, Colin gave her a tour of the house, showing her all the improvements he had made. "This place is amazing," Karen said, looking around in awe. "You've done so much." "It's been good for me," Colin replied. "Keeps me busy." That evening they sat on the porch, watching the sunset and sipping wine. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long while, Colin felt at peace. As the night grew darker, Karen turned to him, her expression serious. "Colin, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" he asked, his heart pounding. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said, taking his hand. "I want to be with you, but I need to know you're ready to move on, ready to build a new life together." Colin looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and hope there. He knew she was right. He had been holding on to the past, but it was time to let go. "I am ready," he said, squeezing her hand. "I want to build a new life with you." Karen smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "Good, because I want that too." They kissed, sealing their commitment to each other. It was a new beginning, a chance to build something real and lasting. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Colin felt a sense of hope and happiness he hadn't felt in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the backyard as the guests mingled, unaware of the storm that was about to break. The party was in full swing, with laughter and chatter filling the air. The scent of barbecue wafted through the yard, mixing with the floral notes of the blooming gardenias. The scene was picture perfect, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Colin stood near the patio, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw his daughters, Jessica, Emily, and Sarah, chatting animatedly with their friends. They were blissfully unaware of the truth that was about to shatter their world. Colin's heart ached for them, but he knew they needed to know. They deserved the truth, no matter how painful it would be. Lauren was in her element, moving gracefully from one group of guests to another, her laughter ringing out like a bell. She looked radiant, her blonde hair catching the light, and her blue eyes sparkling with joy. She was the perfect hostess, charming and engaging, but Colin knew it was all a facade. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had rehearsed this in his mind 1,000 times, but now that the moment was here, it felt surreal. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, sending a quick text to Jessica, who was in charge of the video setup. "It's time," he typed simply. Jessica looked up from her conversation and nodded. She made her way to the patio, where the large TV screen was set up, and began preparing for the reveal. Colin followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the eyes of the guests on him, their curiosity piqued by the sudden change in atmosphere. "Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please?" Colin called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The guests fell silent, turning to face him. Lauren looked at him curiously, a hint of confusion in her eyes. Colin took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Lauren's birthday," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "I have a special message for her that I'd like to share with all of you." He nodded to Jessica, who turned on the TV. The screen flickered to life, showing the recorded video message he had prepared. The guests watched in anticipation, their expressions ranging from curiosity to bewilderment. The video began with a montage of family photos, accompanied by a soft, sentimental tune. Colin's recorded voice narrated the images, recounting happy memories and milestones. Lauren smiled, her eyes misting with tears as she watched the scenes unfold. But then, The tone of the video changed. "Lauren," Colin's voice said, a note of gravity creeping in. "There's something I need to share with you and with everyone here. Something that has changed everything." The video cut to footage from their home security cameras, showing Lauren and Eric in various intimate moments. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the images played out. Lauren's smile froze, her face draining of color as she realized what was happening. Colin kept his eyes on Lauren, watching her reaction closely. She was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of a table for support. The guests were in shock, their expressions ranging from disbelief to anger. Eric, who had been standing near the buffet table, went rigid, his eyes wide with panic. The video continued, showing more damning evidence of the affair. Lauren's betrayal was laid bare for all to see, each clip more incriminating than the last. The guests were silent, their attention riveted to the screen. Colin's voice narrated the footage, detailing the extent of the affair and the pain it had caused him. "This is what I found," Colin's voice said. "This is the truth I have lived with for months. Lauren, you have betrayed me in the most profound way. You have shattered our family and destroyed our trust." The video ended with a final message from Colin. "This is goodbye, Lauren. I can no longer be a part of this lie. I wish you all the best in your new life, but I will not be a part of it." The screen went black, and the silence that followed was deafening. The guests stood in stunned silence, their eyes shifting between Lauren and Colin. Lauren looked around desperately, her eyes pleading for someone to say something, to offer her an escape from the nightmare unfolding before her. "Colin, please," Lauren finally managed to say, her voice shaking. "Let's talk about this. We can work it out." "There's nothing to talk about," Colin replied coldly. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Jessica, Emily, and Sarah were in tears, their faces reflecting a mix of shock and sorrow. They had believed their parents' marriage was solid, a rock upon which their own lives were built. Now that rock had crumbled, leaving them adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Lauren's boss, Eric, was trying to blend into the background, hoping to avoid the wrath of the guests. But Karen, his wife, was having none of it. She stood up, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Lauren, Eric," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You've both destroyed our families. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." With that, she stormed out, leaving Eric to face the fallout alone. Lauren turned to Colin, tears streaming down her face. "Colin, please don't do this. We can fix this." "No, Lauren," Colin said, his voice hard. "It's over. I'm leaving, and I'm never coming back." With that, he turned and walked away, the weight of his decision lifting slightly with each step. He knew there would be difficult days ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope and freedom. As he left the backyard, Colin could hear the murmurs and whispers of the guests behind him. He felt a pang of guilt for the public nature of the reveal, but he knew it had been necessary. The truth had to come out, and it had to be undeniable. He got into his car and drove away, leaving the chaos behind him. His thoughts turned to the future, to the new life he was building. He had a long road ahead, but he was ready to face it. Back at the party, the guests slowly began to disperse, the festive mood shattered by the revelation. Lauren stood alone, her world crumbling around her. She knew she had lost everything, her husband, her family, her reputation. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, and for the first time, she truly understood the consequences of her choices. Jessica, Emily, and Sarah gathered together, seeking comfort in each other's arms. They were devastated by the revelation, but they knew they had to stay strong. They had each other, and they would get through this together. As the last of the guests left, Lauren was left standing alone in the backyard, the echoes of the party still lingering in the air. She knew she had a long road ahead of her, and she had no idea how she would navigate it. But for now, she was left with nothing but her regret and the harsh reality of her actions. The aftermath of the revelation was a whirlwind of emotions and chaos. Lauren's world had crumbled in a matter of minutes, leaving her standing amidst the ruins of her carefully constructed facade. As the last of the guests trickled out, Murmuring among themselves, she felt an overwhelming sense of isolation and despair. Her daughters, the people she loved most in the world, looked at her with a mixture of sorrow and disappointment. Jessica was the first to break the silence. "Mom, how could you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "How could you do this to us? To Dad?" Lauren's lips quivered as she struggled to find the right words. I never meant for it to get this far," she stammered. "I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I love you all so much." Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Love? Is this what love looks like to you? Sneaking around, lying to us all? We trusted you, Mom." Sarah, the quietest of the three, finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad's gone because of you. Our family is shattered because of you. How do we move forward from this?" Lauren felt the weight of their words crushing her. She wanted to reach out, to hold them, but she knew that nothing she said or did could undo the damage she had caused. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. Please, give me a chance to make it right." Jessica stepped forward, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "We need time, Mom, time to process all of this. Right now, we need to be with Dad. He needs us and we need him." With that, Jessica turned and walked away, Emily and Sarah following close behind. Lauren watched them go, her heart breaking with every step they took. She knew she had lost their trust, and possibly their love, and the realization was almost too much to bear. As the evening wore on, Lauren sat alone in the backyard, replaying the events of the night over and over in her mind. She couldn't believe how quickly everything had fallen apart. The life she had built, the family she cherished, it was all gone in an instant. Meanwhile, Colin was driving through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, his mind a tumultuous mix of emotions. He had done what he needed to do, but the reality of it all was sinking in. He had exposed Lauren's betrayal, but in doing so, he had also upended the lives of his daughters and everyone else involved. He pulled over to the side of the road, needing a moment to collect his thoughts. The night was calm, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. It was over. The lies, the deceit, all of it was finally over. Colin's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Karen. "How did it go?" she asked. He stared at the screen for a moment before replying. "It's done. She knows. Everyone knows." "Are you okay?" she texted back. "I will be," he responded. "Just need some time." "Take all the time you need," she replied. "I'm here for you." Colin felt a surge of gratitude. Karen had been a constant source of support, and he knew he couldn't have gotten through this without her. He put the car back in gear and continued driving, his mind clearer but his heart still heavy. Back at the house, Lauren was left to pick up the pieces. She knew she had a long road ahead of her, one filled with difficult conversations and painful realizations, but she was determined to try and make amends, to rebuild the trust she had shattered. The next morning, Lauren woke up to an empty house. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and warmth that once filled the space. She got out of bed and walked through the house, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Every room was a reminder of what she had lost. She decided to reach out to her daughters, to try and start the process of healing. She picked up her phone and sent a group text. "I know I've hurt you all deeply, and I'm so sorry for everything. Please, can we talk? I love you and I want to make things right." She waited anxiously for a response, her heart pounding. After what felt like an eternity, Jessica replied, "We need time, Mom. We're with Dad right now. We'll talk when we're ready." Lauren sighed, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over her. At least they were willing to talk. It was a small step, but it was something. Colin, on the other hand, was settling into his new life in South Dakota. The days were filled with work on the farm and moments of quiet reflection. He found solace in the simplicity of his surroundings, the routine helping to ground him. One afternoon, as he was working on the tractor, his phone rang. It was Ray, the private investigator. "Hey, Colin," Ray said. "I've got some news for you." "What's up?" Colin asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Eric's been fired," Ray said. "The company found out about the embezzlement and they're pressing charges. He's in a world of trouble." Colin felt a grim satisfaction. Good. He deserves it. "There's more," Ray continued. "Lauren's filed for divorce. She's trying to salvage what she can, but it's going to be a tough road for her." Colin nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "Thanks for letting me know, Ray. I appreciate everything you've done." "Anytime," Ray said. "Take care of yourself, Colin." "You too," Colin replied, ending the call. He looked out at the fields, the sun shining brightly overhead. Despite everything, he felt a sense of hope. He had a new life to build, and he was ready for the challenge. That evening, as Colin sat on the porch, he received another text from Karen. "Thinking of you. How are you holding up?" He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Better every day," he replied. "Looking forward to seeing you soon." "Can't wait," she texted back. As the sun set over the horizon, Colin felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but he knew he wasn't facing it alone. He had his daughters, his family, and now possibly a new love in his life. It was a new beginning, and he was ready to embrace it. Colin had always known that the aftermath of his revelation would be chaotic, but he hadn't fully grasped the extent of the emotional fallout until the days began to unfold. Each morning he woke to a sense of profound change, the knowledge that his life and the lives of those around him had been irrevocably altered. He found solace in the simplicity of his new routine on the farm, but the weight of his actions lingered. One morning, as he was fixing the barn roof, his phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Hey, Dad," she said when he answered. Her voice was strained, as if she had been crying. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you holding up?" Colin asked, his heart aching for her. "We're managing," Jessica replied. "But we need to talk. Can we come over?" "Of course," Colin said, his concern deepening. "Come over any time. I'll be here." An hour later, Jessica, Emily, and Sarah arrived. They looked exhausted, their faces etched with worry and sadness. Colin welcomed them with open arms, guiding them into the kitchen where he had already prepared coffee and snacks. They sat around the table, the tension palpable. Jessica took a deep breath and began. "Dad, we've been talking, and we have a lot of questions. We're still trying to process everything that happened. It's been really hard." "I understand," Colin said gently. "Ask me anything. I'll do my best to answer." Emily leaned forward, her eyes filled with confusion. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? Why did you wait until the party?" Colin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to protect you from the truth for as long as I could. But when I found out about your mom's affair, I realized that hiding it wouldn't do any good. You needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it was." Sarah, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice trembling. "What about Mom? Do you think she'll ever change? Do you think she regrets what she did?" Colin paused, considering his words carefully. "I think she regrets getting caught more than anything. Your mom has always been good at compartmentalizing her life, convincing herself that what she was doing was okay, but now she has to face the consequences of her actions. Whether she truly changes or not is up to her." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "We're so angry with her, Dad. We trusted her. How do we move forward from this?" Colin reached out, taking her hand in his. "It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel betrayed. But you have to find a way to move forward for your own sake. Focus on what's important to you, on the people who love and support you. We'll get through this together." They talked for hours, sharing their feelings and trying to make sense of the situation. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and moments of silence, but it was also a step toward healing. By the time they left, Colin felt a glimmer of hope. They were beginning to understand, to process the pain and start the journey toward recovery. Later that afternoon, Colin received a call from Karen. Her voice was a soothing balm to his troubled mind. "Hey, how are you?" she asked. I'm okay, Colin replied. Just had a long talk with the girls. It's been tough, but I think we're starting to move forward. That's good to hear, Karen said. I've been thinking about you a lot. I know this isn't easy. It's not, Colin admitted. But having you to talk to helps. A lot. Karen's voice softened. I'm glad. Listen, I've got some news. Eric is in deep trouble. The company's pressing charges for embezzlement, and he's been fired. His wife's filed for divorce, and she's taking him to the cleaners. Colin felt a surge of satisfaction. He deserves it. I'm glad to hear it. There's more, Karen continued. Lauren's trying to pick up the pieces. She's filed for divorce, but it's going to be a tough road for her. She's lost a lot. Her job, her reputation, and now her family. Colin sighed. I don't wish her ill, but she brought this on herself. I just want to move on and build a new life. You will, Karen said firmly, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. The days turned into weeks, and Colin found himself slowly adjusting to his new reality. The farm work kept him busy, providing a welcome distraction from the turmoil of his emotions. He began to see progress in his daughters as well. They visited often, their conversations becoming less about the past and more about the future. One sunny afternoon, as Colin was working on the tractor, he heard the sound of a car pulling up the driveway. He wiped his hands on a rag and turned to see Jessica and her husband, David, getting out of the car. They walked toward him, their faces a mix of determination and apprehension. Dad, we need to talk, Jessica said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Of course, Colin replied, leading them to the porch. They sat down, and Colin offered them some iced tea. David spoke first. We've been seeing a marriage counselor. We're trying to work through everything, but it's been really hard. Colin nodded, listening intently. I'm glad you're trying. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Jessica took a deep breath. I need to know, Dad. Did you ever have any idea? About Mom, I mean? Did you see any signs? Colin sighed, his eyes distant as he remembered. I had suspicions, but I never wanted to believe it. Your mom was always good at hiding things. It wasn't until I found those emails that I knew for sure. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. It's not your fault, Dad. We were all fooled, but now we need to find a way to move forward, together. Colin felt a surge of pride for his daughter's strength. We will, Jess. We'll get through this, one step at a time. Their conversation lasted well into the evening, filled with moments of reflection and hope. They talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. By the time Jessica and David left, Colin felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was rebuilding not just his life, but his family's as well. The next day, as Colin was working in the barn, his phone rang. It was Karen, her voice filled with excitement. Colin, I've got some great news, she said. I'm coming to visit next week. I've booked my flight and I can't wait to see you. Colin felt a surge of joy. That's wonderful, Karen. I've been looking forward to it. Me too, she replied. We've got a lot to catch up on, and I can't wait to see the farm. As the days passed, Colin found himself eagerly anticipating Karen's visit. He worked tirelessly to get the farm in perfect shape, wanting everything to be just right. He felt a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in years, a feeling of new beginnings and possibilities. When the day of Karen's arrival finally came, Colin drove to the airport, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he waited by the arrivals gate, he spotted her in the crowd. She looked as beautiful as ever, her smile lighting up the room as she saw him. Colin! She called out, rushing toward him. Karen! He replied, opening his arms to embrace her. It's so good to see you! They hugged tightly, the months of separation melting away. Colin felt a sense of relief and happiness wash over him. This was the beginning of something new, something real. They drove back to the farm, chatting about everything and nothing, just enjoying each other's company. When they arrived, Colin gave her a tour of the house, showing her all the improvements he had made. This place is amazing, Karen said, looking around in awe. You've done so much. It's been good for me, Colin replied. Keeps me busy. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset and sipping wine. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long while, Colin felt at peace. As the night grew darker, Karen turned to him, her expression serious. "Colin, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" he asked, his heart pounding. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said, taking his hand. "I want to be with you, but I need to know you're ready. Ready to move on, ready to build a new life together." Colin looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and hope there. He knew she was right. He had been holding on to the past, but it was time to let go. "I am ready," he said, squeezing her hand. "I want to build a new life with you." Karen smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "Good, because I want that too." They kissed, sealing their commitment to each other. It was a new beginning, a chance to build something real and lasting. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Colin felt a sense of hope and happiness he hadn't felt in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The days following Karen's arrival were some of the happiest Colin had experienced in a long time. They spent their time exploring the farm, working side by side on various projects, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life in the countryside. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, and Colin felt a sense of contentment he hadn't known was possible. One morning, as they were having breakfast on the porch, Karen brought up a topic that had been on both of their minds. "Colin, have you thought about what's next for you?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Colin took a sip of his coffee, contemplating her question. "I have," he said finally. "I want to build something meaningful here, something that will last. The farm is a good start, but I also want to get involved in the community, maybe help out with local projects or start a business." Karen smiled. "That sounds wonderful. I've been thinking about my own future too. I want to move here, be closer to you, and start a new chapter in my life. I've already started looking into setting up a law practice here." Colin's heart swelled with joy. "I'd love that, Karen. Having you here would make this place feel complete." They spent the rest of the day planning their future together, discussing ideas for the farm and potential community projects. The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time in a long while, Colin felt truly optimistic about the future. As the weeks passed, Colin and Karen settled into a comfortable routine. They worked hard during the day and spent their evenings relaxing on the porch, enjoying each other's company. The farm began to thrive under their care, and their relationship blossomed. One evening, as they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Karen brought up a topic that had been weighing on her mind. "Colin, have you heard from Lauren?" she asked gently. Colin sighed, his expression pensive. "Not directly. The girls have been keeping me updated. She's struggling, trying to put her life back together. It's not easy for her." Karen nodded. "I imagine it's been difficult for her. Have you thought about reaching out?" Colin shook his head. "I don't think it's a good idea. We both need time to heal and move on. Maybe someday, but not now." Karen reached over and took his hand. "I understand. Just know that I'm here for you, whatever you decide." As the summer turned to fall, the farm became a hub of activity. Colin and Karen worked tirelessly to prepare for the harvest, and the community began to take notice. Neighbors and friends pitched in, and the farm quickly became a place of gathering and support. One crisp autumn morning, Colin received a surprise visit from his daughters. They arrived with smiles on their faces and excitement in their eyes. "Dad, we have some news," Jessica said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "What is it?" Colin asked, his curiosity piqued. "We've decided to move here," Emily announced. "All three of us. We want to be closer to you and help out on the farm." Colin was stunned, his heart swelling with pride and joy. "That's incredible. Are you sure?" Sarah nodded. "We've talked about it a lot. We want to start fresh, and being here feels right. We've already started looking for jobs and places to stay." Colin hugged each of his daughters tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. "I'm so proud of you all. This means the world to me." As the family settled into their new lives in South Dakota, the farm flourished. Colin and Karen's relationship grew deeper, and the bond between Colin and his daughters strengthened. They worked together, laughed together, and began to heal from the past. One evening, as they were all gathered around the dinner table, Jessica raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "And to family." "To family," everyone echoed, clinking their glasses together. As Colin looked around the table at the faces of his loved ones, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them to this moment. They had found their way back to each other, and their future was bright. After dinner, as Colin and Karen sat on the porch watching the stars, he reflected on how far they had come. "We've built something special here," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." Karen smiled, her eyes twinkling in the moonlight. "We've done it together, Colin, and we have so much more to look forward to." They sat in comfortable silence, the night filled with the sounds of nature. The future was uncertain, but they faced it with hope and determination. Together, they were ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, Colin received an unexpected phone call. It was from his old company, offering him a consulting position. They valued his expertise and wanted him to help with a new project. Colin considered the offer carefully. It was a tempting opportunity, but he knew he needed to weigh it against the life he had built here. He discussed it with Karen and his daughters, seeking their advice. In the end, he decided to accept the position on a part-time basis, allowing him to contribute to the company while still focusing on the farm and his family. The new role brought a sense of fulfillment, allowing Colin to use his skills and knowledge in a meaningful way. He found a balance between his professional and personal life, thriving in both areas. As the months passed, the farm continued to prosper, and Colin and Karen's relationship grew stronger. They faced challenges together, supporting each other through the ups and downs. One crisp winter evening, as they sat by the fire, Karen looked at Colin with a mischievous smile. "I have a surprise for you," she said, her eyes sparkling. Colin raised an eyebrow. "Oh? What is it?" Karen reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. "Open it." Colin took the box, his heart pounding with anticipation. He opened it to find a set of keys. "These are for what?" he asked, puzzled. Karen grinned. "I bought a small cabin in the woods not far from here. It's a place where we can escape, just the two of us." Colin's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Karen, this is amazing. Thank you." They spent the rest of the evening planning trips to the cabin, dreaming of quiet weekends spent in nature, away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. As the years went by, Colin and Karen built a life filled with love, laughter, and hard work. The farm became a symbol of their resilience and determination, a place where they had rebuilt their lives and found happiness. Their story was one of redemption and new beginnings, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, hand in hand. As winter gave way to spring, the farm blossomed with new life. The fields were a vibrant green, and the trees were adorned with fresh buds. The sounds of birds chirping and the gentle rustling of leaves filled the air, creating a sense of renewal and hope. For Colin, each day was a step further from the pain of the past and a step closer to a promising future. Karen had moved into a cozy cottage nearby, allowing her to be close to Colin while maintaining her independence. They spent their days working on the farm and their evenings planning their future together. Karen's law practice was thriving, and she had quickly become a respected member of the community. Her skills and dedication made her an invaluable asset, and her warmth and compassion earned her many friends. One morning, as Colin was inspecting the newly planted crops, Karen arrived with a surprise. She was carrying a basket filled with fresh pastries and a thermos of coffee. "I thought we could have breakfast together," she said, her smile lighting up her face. Colin's heart swelled with love and gratitude. "That sounds perfect," he replied, taking the basket from her and leading her to a shady spot under a large oak tree. They spread out a blanket and settled down, enjoying the warm morning sun and the delicious food. As they ate, They talked about their plans for the farm and the community. "I've been thinking," Colin said between bites of a flaky croissant. "We should start a farmer's market. There's so much potential here, and it would be a great way to bring the community together." Karen's eyes lit up with excitement. "I love that idea! We could sell our produce, baked goods, and even handmade crafts. It would be a fantastic way to support local businesses and foster a sense of community." They spent the rest of the morning brainstorming ideas for the market, their enthusiasm growing with each new suggestion. By the time they finished breakfast, they had a clear vision and a plan to make it happen. Over the next few weeks, Colin and Karen worked tirelessly to turn their vision into reality. They reached out to local farmers, artisans, and bakers, inviting them to participate in the market. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and soon they had a diverse group of vendors eager to join. Colin's daughters were equally enthusiastic about the idea. Jessica, Emily, and Sarah pitched in, helping with the organization and promotion of the market. Their energy and creativity were invaluable, and their bond with their father grew stronger as they worked together. On the day of the first market, the farm was buzzing with activity. Vendors set up their stalls, displaying an array of fresh produce, homemade jams, baked goods, and handcrafted items. The air was filled with the sense of fresh flowers and baked bread, and the sound of cheerful chatter created a lively atmosphere. Colin stood at the entrance, welcoming visitors with a warm smile. He felt a surge of pride as he watched the community come together, people from all walks of life mingling and supporting each other. Karen joined him, her eyes shining with happiness. "This is incredible, Colin. Look at what we've created." "We've done it together," Colin replied, squeezing her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the day went on, the market was a resounding success. Families strolled through the stalls, children played on the grassy fields, and neighbors caught up with each other. The sense of community and togetherness was palpable, and Colin knew they had created something truly special. In the midst of the bustling market, Colin spotted a familiar face. It was Ray, the private investigator who had helped him uncover Lauren's affair. Colin waved him over, grateful for the role he had played in his journey. "Ray, it's good to see you," Colin said, shaking his hand. "Likewise, Colin," Ray replied with a smile. "I heard about the market and had to come check it out. This is amazing." "Thank you," Colin said, feeling a surge of pride. "We're really proud of what we've accomplished." As they chatted, Colin's phone buzzed with a message from his old company. He excused himself and checked the message, his eyes widening in surprise. "Karen, you won't believe this," he said, turning to her. "They've asked me to come on board as a full-time consultant. They need my expertise for a major project." Karen's eyes widened with excitement. "That's fantastic news, Colin. Are you going to accept?" Colin thought for a moment, weighing his options. He loved the farm and the life they had built, but he also felt a sense of duty to contribute to the project. "I think I will," he said finally. "But I'll make sure it doesn't take away from what we're building here. I can balance both." Karen smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "I know you can. You're amazing, Colin." With the decision made, Colin felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was excited about the opportunity to use his skills and experience in a new capacity, while still being able to focus on the farm and the community. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Colin juggled his consulting work with the demands of the farm and the growing farmers market. It was challenging, but he thrived on the energy and sense of accomplishment. One evening, as Colin and Karen sat on the porch watching the sunset, Colin shared his thoughts about the future. "I've been thinking about expanding the farm," he said. "We could grow more crops, maybe even start an orchard. There's so much potential here." Karen nodded, her eyes filled with excitement. "I love that idea. We could also look into sustainable farming practices, make this a model for others to follow." Colin smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "We've come so far, Karen. I can't wait to see what the future holds." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up the driveway. They turned to see Jessica, Emily, and Sarah getting out of the car, their faces lit up with excitement. "Dad, we have some news," Jessica said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "What is it?" Colin asked, his curiosity piqued. We've decided to start our own business, Emily announced. We've been inspired by the farmer's market, and we want to create a line of organic skincare products. Colin was stunned, his heart swelling with pride and joy. That's incredible. Are you sure? Sarah nodded. We've already started researching and developing products. We want to create something that's natural and sustainable, just like the farm. Colin hugged each of his daughters tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. I'm so proud of you all. This means the world to me. As the family settled into their new venture, the farm continued to thrive. The farmers' market became a beloved community event, drawing visitors from near and far. Colin and Karen's relationship grew deeper, and the bond between Colin and his daughters strengthened. One sunny afternoon, as Colin was working in the orchard, he received a surprise visit from Lauren. She approached hesitantly, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Colin, can we talk? She asked, her voice trembling. Colin felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a lingering sense of betrayal, but he knew they needed closure. Sure, he said, leading her to a shaded spot under a tree. They sat down, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. I'm so sorry for everything I've done, Lauren began, her eyes filling with tears. I know I've hurt you and the girls deeply. I've lost so much because of my actions, and I'm trying to make amends. Colin nodded, his expression somber. I appreciate that, Lauren, but it's going to take time. Trust doesn't come back easily. I understand, Lauren said, her voice breaking. I just want you to know that I'm working on myself. I'm seeing a therapist, and I'm trying to become a better person. Colin sighed, feeling a pang of sympathy. That's good to hear. I hope you find the peace and happiness you're looking for. They talked for a while longer, sharing their thoughts and emotions. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also necessary. By the time Lauren left, Colin felt a sense of closure, a weight lifting from his shoulders. That evening, as Colin and Karen sat by the fire, he shared his conversation with Lauren. I think we're finally starting to heal, he said, his voice filled with hope. Karen nodded, her eyes filled with warmth. You've come so far, Colin, and you're building something beautiful here. As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance, Colin knew that the future was bright. They had faced many challenges, but they had come out stronger. Together, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. The winter months brought a chill to the air, but inside the farmhouse, warmth and activity filled every corner. The farm was thriving, and the farmer's market had become a staple in the community. Colin's consulting work kept him busy, and Karen's law practice was flourishing. They had found a rhythm, balancing their professional responsibilities with their personal lives. One crisp morning, Colin received a call that would set the stage for the final chapter of his journey. It was from his old friend and colleague, Tom, who had remained a steadfast support throughout Colin's ordeal. Colin, we need to talk, Tom said, his voice serious. There's something you need to know about Lauren. Colin's heart sank. What is it, Tom? She's planning to take legal action against you, Tom said. She's claiming that the way you exposed her affair was defamatory and caused her emotional distress. Colin felt a surge of anger and disbelief. Are you serious? After everything she did, she's now trying to blame me? I know it's absurd, Tom said. But she's determined. I wanted to give you a heads up so you can prepare. Colin thanked Tom and hung up, feeling a storm of emotions brewing inside him. He knew he had to act quickly to protect himself and his family. He immediately called Karen, who was at her office. Karen, we have a problem, he said, explaining the situation. Karen's response was swift and resolute. We'll fight this, Colin. She has no grounds for her claims. We'll gather evidence and make sure the truth prevails. They spent the next few weeks preparing for the legal battle. Karen worked tirelessly, gathering documents, witness statements, and any evidence that could support Colin's case. Colin's daughters were also a great help, providing their own testimonies about the impact of Lauren's actions on their lives. As the court date approached, tension mounted. Colin knew this would be the final showdown, a chance to put the past to rest once and for all. He was determined to face it head-on, knowing that he had the support of Karen, his daughters, and the community behind him. On the morning of the trial, Colin dressed carefully, feeling the weight of the day ahead. Karen met him at the courthouse, her presence a steadying force. "We've got this, Colin," she said, squeezing his hand. "Just tell the truth. We'll make sure justice is served." They entered the courtroom, the atmosphere tense and charged. Lauren was already there, looking determined and defiant. Colin felt a pang of sadness as he looked at her, remembering the life they once shared. But he knew that this was necessary, a step toward closure and healing. The proceedings began and the lawyers presented their cases. Lauren's attorney argued that Colin's public revelation had caused her significant emotional distress and damaged her reputation. Karen countered with evidence of Lauren's affair, the steps Colin had taken to gather proof, and the impact of Lauren's actions on their family. Colin took the stand, his heart pounding. He spoke calmly and clearly, recounting the events that led to the birthday party revelation. He described the pain of discovering Lauren's affair, the months of planning, and the decision to expose the truth in a public setting. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Colin said, his voice steady, "but the truth needed to come out. My daughters deserved to know what was happening. It wasn't about revenge, it was about honesty and integrity." Lauren took the stand next, her demeanor defensive. She described the humiliation she felt and the subsequent fallout in her personal and professional life. She painted herself as a victim, trying to garner sympathy from the court. As the testimonies continued, it became clear that the evidence was overwhelmingly in Colin's favor. Karen's meticulous preparation and the support of Colin's daughters played a crucial role in dismantling Lauren's claims. The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she delivered her verdict. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, it is clear that Mr. Colin acted within his rights. The claims of defamation and emotional distress are unfounded. The case is dismissed. A wave of relief washed over Colin. He felt a burden lift from his shoulders, the weight of the past finally easing. He turned to Karen, who smiled triumphantly. "We did it," she whispered. As they left the courtroom, Colin felt a sense of closure. The legal battle had been a final hurdle, and now it was behind them. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he felt ready to face them with Karen by his side. In the weeks that followed, life on the farm returned to a sense of normalcy. Colin and Karen focused on their work and their plans for the future. The farmers' market continued to thrive, and the community grew closer. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Colin reflected on the journey they had taken. It had been a long and difficult road, but they had come through stronger and more united. "I'm so grateful for you, Karen," Colin said, his voice filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without you." Karen smiled, her eyes shining with love. "We're a team, Colin, and we've built something beautiful together." As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Colin knew that they were ready for whatever the future held. They had faced their past, fought their battles, and emerged victorious. Now they could focus on building a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. The aftermath of the trial brought a sense of peace and finality to Colin's life. With the legal battle behind him, he could fully embrace the new chapter he was building with Karen and his daughters. The farm continued to flourish, the farmers' market was a resounding success, and their community bonds grew stronger each day. One bright spring morning, as Colin was working in the orchard, Karen approached with a letter in her hand, her expression a mix of curiosity and excitement. "Colin, this just arrived," she said, handing him the envelope. "It's from your old company." Colin wiped his hands and took the letter, opening it carefully. Inside was a formal invitation for a company event, honoring his contributions and celebrating the success of the recent project he had consulted on. "They want me to come to the city for an awards ceremony," Colin said, surprised. "They're recognizing my work on the new project." Karen beamed with pride. "That's fantastic, Colin. You deserve it." Colin felt a surge of emotions, pride, gratitude, and a hint of nostalgia for his old life. "I'd love for you to come with me," he said, taking Karen's hand. It would mean a lot to have you there. Of course, Karen replied, squeezing his hand. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The trip to the city was a whirlwind of activity. Colin and Karen dressed in their best, arriving at the elegant venue filled with colleagues, friends, and industry leaders. The atmosphere was festive, and Colin felt a sense of accomplishment as he mingled with familiar faces. During the ceremony, Colin was called to the stage to receive his award. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the audience, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Thank you all for this incredible honor, he began, his voice steady. This project was a team effort, and I'm proud to have been a part of it. But more importantly, this journey has taught me the value of resilience, integrity, and the power of community. I'm grateful for the support of my family and friends, and I'm excited for what the future holds. The applause was thunderous, and as Colin left the stage, he felt a sense of closure. He had come full circle, finding success and recognition while staying true to his values. After the ceremony, Colin and Karen took a walk through the city, reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. They stopped at a small cafe, enjoying coffee and pastries as they watched the world go by. This city holds so many memories, Colin said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. But I'm glad to be building new ones with you. Karen smiled, her eyes warm. We're creating something beautiful, Colin, and there's so much more to look forward to. As they returned to the farm, the sense of peace and contentment deepened. They continued to work side by side, their love and partnership growing stronger each day. One sunny afternoon, as they were tending to the garden, Colin's phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice filled with excitement. Dad, I have some amazing news, she exclaimed. We've secured a major distributor for our skincare products. This is going to take our business to the next level. Colin felt a surge of pride. That's incredible, Sarah. I'm so proud of you and your sisters. Sarah's voice softened. We couldn't have done it without your support, Dad. You've been our rock. As he ended the call, Colin felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His daughters were thriving, Karen's law practice was flourishing, and the farm was a beacon of hope and community. They had come through so much, and their future was bright. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, there was a palpable sense of joy and togetherness. They laughed, shared stories, and celebrated their achievements. The bonds between them were stronger than ever, forged through adversity and strengthened by love. After dinner, as Colin and Karen sat on the porch watching the stars, Colin reflected on their journey. We've come so far, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I couldn't have imagined this life a few years ago. Karen leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. It's been an incredible journey, Colin, and it's only the beginning. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, Colin knew that they were ready for whatever the future held. They had faced their past, overcome their challenges, and built a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. The farm continued to thrive, the farmers' market grew, and their community bonds deepened. Colin and Karen's love story became an inspiration to those around them, a testament to resilience and the power of second chances. One day, as they were walking through the orchard, Karen stopped and turned to Colin, her eyes shining with excitement. Colin, there's something I want to talk to you about, she said, her voice trembling with anticipation. What is it? Colin asked, his curiosity piqued. Karen took a deep breath. I've been thinking about our future, and I want us to start a family. I know it's a big step, but I believe we're ready. Colin felt a surge of joy and love. I've been thinking about that too, he admitted. I want nothing more than to build a family with you, Karen. They embraced, their hearts filled with hope and excitement. It was a new beginning, a chance to create a future filled with love and happiness. As they continued their walk, hand in hand, Colin knew that they were ready for this next chapter. They had faced their past, built a strong foundation, and now they were ready to grow their family and continue building their beautiful life together. The years that followed were filled with joy and adventure. Colin and Karen welcomed a beautiful baby boy whom they named Ethan. He brought a new light into their lives, and their love for each other grew even stronger as they navigated the joys and challenges of parenthood. The farm became a place of laughter and learning, as Ethan grew up surrounded by the love and support of his family. Jessica, Emily, and Sarah doted on their little brother, and the bond between them was unbreakable. Colin and Karen's story was one of redemption, resilience, and the power of love. They had faced their past, overcome their challenges, and built a life filled with hope, joy, and endless possibilities. Together, they embraced the future with open hearts, knowing that they could face anything as long as they had each other.